This is OTR FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome to Cracked, the podcast, the program that slays the dragons of mental health by stripping away the shame, embarrassment, fear, and stigma. Because mental health isn't something that affects just some of us, it applies to all of us. Here to shine a new light on areas of mental health that often go unvisited are your hosts, Rebecca Shaper and Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
I am good. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's you and me. I'm not sure where Sandy is, so we're just going to have to wing it.
Yeah, no problem. You know, technology is great, but it doesn't always work.
Exactly. So you are the director and producer of the film Warrior Heroes. And my question to you is, every single day between 17 and 22 veterans take their lives. That needs to stop, which is why today we're talking about PTSD and a riveting new documentary called The Features: Life-Changing Options that are not just giving hope to veterans and others with PTSD, but are literally saving lives. Horrified by those statistics, you, Michael Gier, embarked, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Perfect.
Good. Embarked on a mission to find successful non-drug treatments and programs that give veterans their lives back by healing the wounds of PTS. That mission has culminated in a documentary called Wounded Heroes that's being released on March 5th. Michael Gier has produced and directed hundreds of TV commercials, corporate video projects, and short feature films. Wounded Heroes is his first project. Okay, welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Yes, it's my first documentary project, and it's a full-length feature, and I'm excited to do it.
Yeah, the statistics are appalling. The stories are both heartbreaking and incredible heartwarming. Was there one single defining incident, person, or story that ignited your passion for this project? And was it born from a series of wounded hero moments?
You know, what it was actually a single guy. His name was Carl in San Diego here in California in the United States. He is a veteran I interviewed because I was originally going to do a different project. It was also called Wounded Heroes, and it was a feature film that we wanted to release theatrically, not a documentary. And to learn more about the problem of post-traumatic stress, I was interviewing veterans, generals, different military brass. And when I came across Carl in San Diego, and we did this interview, he was telling me how he had post-traumatic stress, of course. He had tried to commit suicide, I think at that point 3 times. And he was on, up until just recently, he was on up to 18 different prescription drugs, and they had just reduced it down to 16. I mean, that was shocking to me. How is it possible you can be on that many drugs? He was a young guy. He was in his late 20s on 16 prescriptions. And he was a mess. I mean, he's shaking, and he was just not in a good place, even with those drugs, or maybe because of the drugs. But the main thing is, he told me they were just a Band-Aid, that they weren't actually solving the problem of post-traumatic stress. And so when I walked out of that interview, I talked to my wife, and I said, you know, I need to put this other film on hold, and we need to do a documentary. She's one of my producers on the film, Terry Gier. We need to do a documentary, and we need to go out and see if there's anything else out there available that will actually help our veterans or anybody, first responders or anybody battling post-traumatic stress, get their lives back, because the drugs aren't working. They're just a Band-Aid. So let's find something that will actually solve the problem of post-traumatic stress. So we spent the last 3 years all over the country interviewing experts, doctors, going to different treatments and programs. And that's what this film is about. We found options that are life-saving. They do get people off all the drugs, if not all the drugs, I should say, 1 or 2 at most. And they get their lives back. They can sleep at night. They can keep a job. And so, yeah, Carl started it all. And so I still have the screenplay for that feature film that I do still want to do at some point. But this film, the documentary Wounded Heroes, it was too important to do it, get it out there, and save some lives to let people know there is hope.
Yes. Could you explain some common things for PTSD in veterans and why is it so difficult for them to ask for help?
There's a few reasons. And again, I'm not a military guy. I respect and honor our military, which is why I did this, and our first responders. And I've heard from them that the reason is many. One, they're trained to be strong,
Yep.
trained to be tough, and they feel like if something is happening in them, like post-traumatic stress, that makes them weak. And if they tell somebody within the military or within the police department or fire department, then that could hurt their career. They may not get promoted. They may be put on leave. They just don't know. So they hold it in, they keep it inside, they bottle it up. And then many of them start self-medicating with alcohol, and usually alcohol and whatever else they choose to self-medicate with. But it doesn't solve the problem. And it does get worse until many of them just fall apart. And so, yeah, that's really the main reason. Feeling tough. And, I've talked to veterans, and I had a veteran say, I don't think it's in the documentary, but he did say it on camera. He said, look, you're weak if you don't get help. This guy was a firefighter, and he was a veteran for many, many years in the military. A real tough guy, seen a lot. And he said, like I just mentioned, you are weak if you don't get help. Get help. Even if you can do it privately, you don't have to tell. And here's the thing about the film. There are treatments and programs we found that nobody has to know that you are reaching out for help. They are people helping you that have been there. Many of them are veterans who have been trained, who are now helping other veterans or first responders. They've been there, they understand it, and it's a one-on-one thing. Nobody else knows about it. And because of Zoom, you can do it via Zoom from anywhere in the world. It's just the help is there. You don't have to ruin your career over it, but that is why so many people don't want to talk about it and don't want to share it.
Yeah, I think it's hard for them to be vulnerable because you're right, because they have to put up this front that they're so strong and they can combat anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about some of the therapies. Are we having difficulty?
I just saw a question pop up. I guess that's coming from people who might be watching, but someone said alcohol gets used to help people sleep, and that's true. And the thing is with that, when you have post-traumatic stress, many times they cannot sleep through the night, and they have to drink so much alcohol just so that they can pass out and try and get some sleep. And if it's okay, I got a quick story for you. Can I tell you that now? Because it kind of goes along with what he's saying. One of the treatments is called ART, Accelerated Resolution Therapy, and Myrna did it in Florida with a patient. This guy was a Vietnam veteran, and he was sent to Myrna by the judge because he had so many DUIs. They're like, you're not getting your license, but you're also going to go and get help. Either that or you're going to jail. So he went to Myrna, but he sat down and he literally said, look here, little missy, I'm only here because the judge told me I have to be here. I don't want to be here because I am not going to stop drinking. It's the only thing I can do to get some sleep, to get some peace because of what I'm going through because of my memories of Vietnam. So it turns out what his trauma was, the major one, is that he and his buddy were, of course, from Vietnam, and he got to a place just seconds too late, and he watched his best friend get killed. And because it was just seconds, he felt like, I think he felt guilt for not being there sooner. He took out the enemy, but he couldn't save his friend. And he was devastated, and he didn't want to leave his friend in the jungle. So he picked him up and put him over his shoulder. And for 3 days, he walked him through the jungle to get him out. And the other soldiers were like, you got to put him down. And he's like, I'm not going to. I'm taking him home. So 3 days. And so Myrna looked at him and she said, you've been carrying him for 40 years. And which is true. And this guy who walked in there saying, you're not going to be able to help, he, after one session, said he felt like his life had changed. You gave me my friend back, because all he was remembering was that last moment.
Right.
Forgotten all the great things that made them good friends. She, through the session, which I won't even try to talk about what she does, but it's just talking and walking them through a protocol. That night, he slept for the first time without alcohol. He slept through the entire night. And from that point on, one session, he did go back for more, but that first session slept through the night. So sleep is so important. And we all know that. And some have to drink just so they can sleep. I don't blame them, but they can get help so that they don't need the alcohol anymore. And that's what ART does. And also RTM, which is very similar, reconsolidation of traumatic memories.
Wow, that is so powerful. I remember when I was watching the documentary, there's a gentleman, Brian, isn't that correct?
Ryan Anderson, yes.
Yes. Would you like to speak about his story? I thought that was extremely compelling.
So what part of his story did you think was the most compelling?
All the drinking, he was at his wit's end. He couldn't anymore. And so.
Well, Brian was interesting because he kept seeing his friends that had been killed overseas here. And, he said he'd be walking down the mall and he'd see Calvin go walking right past him. And he'd stop and he'd look back and, his other really good friends, same thing, different places, he'd see them. He'd be standing in his kitchen and all of a sudden he'd see bullets flying past him. And, he's ducking for cover and driving down the street, driving up next to a car. Because overseas, when they would drive down the road, it was always, high risk and always on guard. And so he couldn't come home and relax when he drove down the street. He also here was uptight and, having a hard time just driving down the street. So he had, tremendous issues with post-traumatic stress. ART is what helped him as well, accelerated resolution therapy. And he now runs a nonprofit helping other veterans, a nonprofit called Veterans Alternative. And he spends his life now helping others because he has his life back and a wonderful marriage. And Brian's doing great now.
I think what also too was very, impactful in the film are the pictures, the actual pictures. Like Brian, I remember him talking about there was flames in his throat. And there was
that was John.
John.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I apologize.
No.
Oh my goodness, that was very compelling.
So John, there's an IED explosion underneath their Humvee, and he said he woke up listening to a blood-curdling scream, only to realize it was him, and flames all around him. And as you said, as he breathed in, the flames in his body, he was pretty burned up. Thankfully, he survived it. His good friend who was in the car as well survived it, but majority of his body was covered in flames. And so to this day, he's, got the after effects of being burned everywhere. John was burned on his face and stuff, but not so bad that he looks good, thankfully, but he's got the emotional scars.
Yes.
And so he also drank a lot, as you said. He drank to sleep. And after he went to the Brain Treatment Center, which is here in Los Angeles, and after working with them, he said he went out with his buddy to have a drink. Not one, he said many drinks, which is what they normally did.
Right.
And he said just after he started sipping the first drink, he was like, I don't even want this. He goes, I feel so good. I don't want this alcohol to take me out of this connection I now have with my friend. He said, because when he was battling post-traumatic stress, he had no connection. He felt numb. He said he felt isolated. And so now he actually had a connection. He was like, why am I drinking this? It's going to ruin this between my friend and I. So that was when he stopped drinking and realized, wow, this treatment is really making a difference.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember him saying that he didn't think this would work at all.
Well, yeah, you know why? And it's kind of funny because we joked about it in the film, and some of it, of course, didn't make it into the film. But in the interview itself, we were joking because they put something on your head and then the computer skins everything. And it comes out as squiggly lines, that the doctor, the expert, can read, and it tells them a lot about the patient. And in this case, the doctor looked at it and literally said, I don't think you can even get through a book. You probably aren't able to keep a job. And he just started going down a list of what he thought the reading said about John. And every single thing he said was correct. And I said to John, the doctor got all of that just from squiggly lines,
It's amazing.
John's like, this is not going to work. Are you kidding me? And then the guy starts telling him his whole personality. And he's like, well, maybe it is going to work. I don't know. And then what they do is they put, I think it's a magnet. I'm not sure what it is. Something here.
Yeah, I remember that in the film. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Once they know where the problem is, they put a magnet and then they dial into that part of your brain and they do whatever they do. It's talked about it in the film. But anyway, that's where he was laughing, going, you've got to be kidding me if you think this is going to work. this stupid thing on my head, and then he said that night was the first night he slept in years through the entire night.
Yes.
And so yeah, there's what's amazing to me was sitting in front of these veterans and hearing their amazing stories, what they experienced at war, how they came back and how it affected them at home.
Right.
And then because of the treatment or program they found, how it changed and gave them their life back, saved their lives, because most of them were suicidal.
Exactly. There's hope. Another therapy that I saw in the film that I really love too, it's called the Saddles and Services. And it shows horses have an intuitive sense, which person to select and how the individual and horse work together. Can you explain the relationship with the horse and the individual and how animals can be so healing for us? I thought that was really compelling too.
It is. And, I think most of us would agree that dogs are an amazing pet.
Yes.
We can bond like them. Like our dog is our child.
Yeah.
I mean, they are our child. There's a bond there you can't even describe. And in a lot of ways, it's the same thing with the horse. The horse, Saddles and Service, they're located in San Diego, California. The horses are rescue horses. And so when they come, isn't that amazing? So when they come to the ranch, they also have their own needs. And the veterans and the first responders, the police officers, firefighters that are all there at the ranch, they have their needs. And what's great is the horse can sense what the other person is feeling, and they connect with somebody. And then those two end up having a tremendous bond, and they literally heal each other. That's what I think is so amazing. Isn't that great?
I love it. So let me ask you, through these therapies, do they have another type of follow-up therapy, or is it just they go maybe 2 or 3 sessions and then they're over their PTSD? How does that work? How does it work?
Yeah, it depends on the treatment. Some, like ART, and somebody asked, what was that therapy called again? And it was Kelly. I think if she was talking about ART, it's Accelerated Resolution Therapy. RTM is Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories. They're both very similar. They have the same outcome. They just have a different way of going about it. But they're both wonderful treatments. But with those, you usually have anywhere from 3 to 6 at the most sessions with a professional. Again, you can do it via Zoom. The horse therapy, people just love going to the ranch, hanging out. You're out in beautiful Ramona, outside in the mountains, and this beautiful ranch, and it's relaxing, and there's no city noise, and there's no hustle and bustle. And, so a lot of them will just continue to go back just because it's so amazing. And they want to see their buddy, their horse. Yeah. And, but what I learned doing the documentary is that there's really no one treatment necessarily, that it's always beneficial to follow it with other treatments. And so you may feel 100% better. You may even be better completely, but it's still good to follow up with other things. There are programs. We highlight Veterans Alternative on the East Coast. And then we also highlighted Warrior. I'm going to forget their name. They're going to shoot me. Warfighter Advance. That's what it is. Dr. Featon, you're going to see a clip of her a little bit later, but Dr. Featon runs that, and Warfighter Advance. It's an amazing group, and it's a week-long program, and they bring together people to talk about what they're going through, and they have experts in there, and they talk about the drugs, why they don't work. They have a lot of things that they do to show them that, you are as tough as you always have been, and as tough as you used to be. But going back to the horse therapy, one of the soldiers who's a veteran there told me, because of Saddles and Service, he said, I feel like a soldier again. And that to me, he says that in the film, that to me was so powerful, to feel strong, tough, and a soldier, or a strong, confident police officer or firefighter, and then to lose that because of post-traumatic stress, to be able to get that confidence and that strength and that, I guess the word is just confidence back, is just life-changing. For him to say, I feel like a soldier again, that's amazing.
We have a clip. Do you want to show Jonathan's clip? Would you like to do that?
That'd be great. Yeah, we can do that now if you'd like.
So I know that our producer popped the question. I think it'd be powerful for the audience
Oh, the first clip. Yeah, let's go do the
let's
first
do
clip.
it. Yeah, I think that would be. I think of.
Everything just went black, and I remember waking up to a scream that I've never heard before in my life, not on a movie, not in acting, nothing. And a second later, I realized that was coming from myself, and I didn't know how that was possible. And I thought, well, am I dead? Am I dying? Like, what's happening right now? And as I opened my eyes, I took a deep breath, and just fire went down into my lungs. And I looked around, and the whole cab was on fire. And I was by myself, and I couldn't see anything. And I looked around the cab, and I thought, I must be trapped in here, and this is it. And the fear that I had was profound. I recognized that I wasn't the same person that I was, and I was having a lot of anxiety and started having panic attacks, and I couldn't sleep. I was a shell. I just was hardly living. So I was praying for a car accident, for a plane to crash, for just something to take me out of this misery, because it was unbearable to a certain degree. It can be even harder when you have loved ones and family and friends telling you just snap out of it, or hey, everything's okay, or da-da-da, because you don't feel that to be true. What you feel is an anguish and an inner pain and an inner just anxiety that won't ever leave you, and unless you're blackout drunk or just medicated out of your mind. The rest of it is just pretending to be here, pretending to look at you, pretending to talk to you, pretending to be around people or friends, if you can even do that. Even in all of those experiences, you are lonely. You are completely wrapped up in your own inner pain that you can't really truly connect with the person that's sitting next to you. So if you go through life without being able to experience love and connection, that starts to kill you inside, and your soul starts to want to get out of here and just say, this is enough. What's the point? There's nothing good that I can experience. So after I had the recording, and they showed me what was wrong with my brain, and they generate a protocol from that. So based on your individual brain, they input a frequency that they're going to feed back to it, and a location that is the most impacted. And it feels like a finger tap on your head. And I got the first session. I remember looking at the guy and laughing at him and just thinking, you gotta be kidding me if you think this is going to do anything. I've had too many things that have been promising before that have been fleeting, and there's no way it could be this easy, kind of a thing. But that night I slept for 8 hours, and I hadn't slept in 8 years like that. And this treatment was restoring my brainwaves, and I was still drinking a lot and smoking a lot of pot and taking my medicines. And 3 weeks into it, I sat down with a buddy, and we went to drink a large amount of alcohol like we usually do. And I had one cocktail and just said, I don't want another one. And for me, that shocked me. And what I noticed was that I just felt calm inside. I felt peaceful inside, and I was able to finally connect with somebody, and I finally connected with my friend. And the last thing I wanted to do was to have another sip of alcohol, which would possibly take me out of that experience.
So
Isn't that amazing?
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness sakes, yes. So I got just one quick question before we have to go to break at 12:30. How does the veteran know which therapy is best for them?
I think when they watch the film, they're going to have to decide what looks the most appealing and do their own research, of course, but then just try something and see which one, see what does work. For me, I've seen every one of them work for veterans. And so, and there's another one we can talk about when we come back from break called stellate ganglion block.
Yes.
That one's we can talk about as well, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that is very powerful. Yeah. All of them are. I absolutely.
Yeah.
And your film is, when I watched it, I have a brother-in-law who was in the war, and I thought about him, and I know how difficult it must be for him. I mean, he's out now, but until you see pictures, until I see a visual, it gives me more insight of really what they go through. It's
Yeah.
I just can't imagine.
No. So how much time do we have before the commercial?
2 minutes.
Okay. So that's something you kind of brought up, which is, I think, important, because they do call it post-traumatic stress disorder. And we've been taking the D off because it's not a disorder. When I first started the project, I was calling it post-traumatic stress disorder until some veterans kind of got on my case by email saying, quit saying disorder. So I did some research and found out, first of all, post-traumatic stress is a very normal event for any human being that experiences a traumatic event. Going to war and experiencing what they experience, being a firefighter, a police officer, seeing what they see on a daily basis, 911 dispatchers, doctors dealing with COVID. It's not normal to go through that kind of trauma on a regular basis. And it is normal when they come back and have post-traumatic stress. And so nobody should feel bad about experiencing something normal, and it's not a disorder. Very important to know.
Thank you for correcting me on that. I didn't realize that. And that's a very profound statement right there.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's important for people to understand, which is why, again, they don't have to be quiet. What they're dealing with is a normal reaction. And so feel free to say, okay, I'm normal. Now let's get this resolved and move on.
We're going to have to go to break right now, and we'll see you after break.
Okay.
Okay.
The Real Conscious Connection. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Worried about your friend but don't know how to reach out?
You could say how are you or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat with them in VR. It's so good. If you think you should check in, yeah, you should. Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health.
Whatever gets you talking.
Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org.
Well, welcome back. And I'm back. Sorry about that. You just won't believe what the problem was. I'll tell you later. But it's Murphy's Law. So anyway, it's good to be in on this show because I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. Michael, I wanted to ask you, there has been a 700% increase in military purchases of psychiatric meds. And at the same time, there's been a significant increase in death by suicide in members of the military. Psychiatric meds, as you say in the movie, are neurotoxins. They're very dangerous and deadly to brain cells and brain function. There is a standout piece. I mean, the whole of the documentary is standout as far as I'm concerned, but there's one particular piece that just my jaw dropped to the floor. And this is when you are speaking to a naval psychologist who is running these retreats for groups of veterans. We're going to play a clip from that because there's nothing I could say that would be more powerful than actually seeing that clip. So if we can play that now, I think people will be as shocked.
What happened to me over time was, as I spent time on active duty, that the things that we were doing to quote unquote treat trauma under the medical model were not only ineffectual, they were actually harmful at a lot of times. And so people who'd come in and ask for help, as they were more and more instructed to do, and as they were receiving this help, they would actually deteriorate. And some of those treatments ended in suicide. And so that just, got me asking those questions. What's wrong with this picture? Why is this happening? And so I began to research, and I began to look at the scientific literature rather than the stuff I was fed in graduate school, which had a lot of drug company influence. And when I started to look at the scientific literature, what I found was that what was happening to those men and women was actually a predictable outcome. It was actually very well documented, and that the FDA and certainly psychiatry and the scientists knew that these were actually predictable outcomes.
So if they knew it, why were they allowing it?
Do you want me to say that on camera?
Yeah.
Money. It's all about money and guild interest. It's always about money and guild interest. Every single member of Congress has drug company reps that are lobbying them at all times, and they also have the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association. They all have their own little lobby posse, and they're all
It's all about the money.
writing checks. Well, look at the risk-benefit ratio for them. Nothing trumps the risk of not getting reelected.
Powerful.
Yeah.
That is just mind-blowing. I mean, really mind-blowing. What can you say to that? I mean, I know that there are many bodies being started up that are working to take the money out of politics. And I think if they can take the money out of politics, then they can take the money out of a lot of other things that go along with that, like, lobbying drugs companies, etc. One of the things that Mary referred to in her segment was the sexual abuse that happens in the military. And it's not just affecting the women, it's affecting the men as well. How are these therapies helping people who've suffered sexual abuse? And how do you get to the men who've suffered from that? Because they're the least likely to actually admit to it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was Sherry who talked about that in the documentary. She's in San Diego. And she is a woman who had sexual trauma when she was younger, I believe. I don't think it took place in the military. Some of the women I interviewed, it did take place in the military. But when I talked about it with her, she told me how rampant it is among men, which was shocking to me because I didn't realize that. And because it happens to men, they don't want to talk about it. I mean, it's difficult for anybody to have to experience that, women or men. But for whatever reason, well, I guess it makes sense as a man. It's even more shameful, I guess. And so they don't want to talk about it. So she said a lot of men just suffer in silence, and it's devastating on their life. And again, what's great about this is there are treatments that resolve that as well. And you don't have to let the world know. You don't have to bring it all up. And that's the other thing that's great about some of these treatments like ART and RTM. I keep talking about them, but those two, they're all wonderful. But what's great about them is you don't have to talk about the trauma. The VA here in the US had something called prolonged exposure therapy, where they had them talk about the trauma over and over and over and over again. And it was not helpful. All it did was make them worse for many. Most dropped out of the program. Some committed suicide, but there were a few it did work with. But for me, it was such a failure because it was only a few that it helped. I don't know why they still do it. With RTM and ART, you don't have to talk about the trauma at all. And yet you have incredible results. And so I think that's really important. And so that's the same thing with the sexual trauma. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to think about it. And you are going to get tremendous results.
Yeah.
I'm curious, is the therapy different for men than it is for women?
No.
I was just, because, women have more hormones and, we're just biological.
Yes, it's a neurological intervention with those two, ART and RTM. It's a neurological intervention, and so it works the same neurologically for a man or a woman. And I saw somebody posted earlier a question about where they can get information about the treatments. If they go to the film's website, woundedheroesdocumentary.com, just send me an email through the contact page, and I can point you in whatever direction you'd like to go in regards to that. Plus, of course, the film will be out March 5th, but it's great to hear the stories from the veterans, see what they've experienced, how the different treatments and programs changed them, and then make a decision on which one you think is going to be most appropriate for you or your loved one.
Well, there's lots of clips too on your website that people can see, and they can hear some of these stories, and they're very, very compelling. Michael, you make it clear in Wounded Heroes that there's a huge difference between taking drugs that affect the mind, brain, and taking drugs that affect the body, and the people being offered drugs for PST need to know what they're taking and why. And you give a really good list of questions. Can you share that with us that people should be asking?
Well, and this is stuff I learned from Dr. Featon, who we just saw the clip with her earlier. This whole documentary, when you do a documentary, you do a lot of interviews and you get a lot of information, and you don't know which direction you're going to end up going. And editing also kind of helps to create it. So at a certain point, after talking to Dr. Featon and some others, I realized it's really important to talk about the drugs and implied consent, which basically means you as the patient, you need to understand what you're taking, what you're being prescribed, and the side effects, the potential side effects. Very important, so that you make the decision if you want to take that or not. Don't just blindly take it because a doctor wants to prescribe it. And so there's a whole section, I think it's maybe 10 minutes long or so, with a lot of different doctors and experts talking about implied consent. And then also drugs.com I talk about in the film. I can't actually show it on Amazon and iTunes. They won't let me put a website. But I do talk about sites generically like drugs.com, where you can go and type in the prescription you've been prescribed. It will tell you what the side effects are. There's an interaction checker where you can put in the medications, plural, you're taking to see how they interact with each other, because sometimes the interaction can cause traumatic events in your life and in your mind and suicidal. And the other thing is the psychotic drugs, many of them are black labeled. And that's what they prescribe for many of the post-traumatic stress symptoms, these black labeled psychotic drugs with very serious side effects. And black labeled for the FDA means the strongest, worst, most highly side affected medications out there. And so you need to know that you're taking that and understand it, because people on post-traumatic stress many times are depressed and suicidal. And then the doctor prescribes them a medication with a side effect that's depression and suicidal tendencies. Well, that's just compounding the problem. So if someone starts taking the medication that's supposed to help, and all of a sudden they're feeling more depressed and more suicidal, it may not be them. It may just be the medication they're taking. So it's important that people understand that side effect. So if they start to feel it, they'll know, oh, I must be having this side effect, and then talk to the doctor about changing it to something else, or watch the film and go to one of these treatments and get off the drugs. These people I've talked to are off all their drugs, or they're on maybe one or two. And the drugs that they're on are not the psychotic drugs. It's the, basic, simple types of things. But they can get off the drugs, all of them, with these treatments, which is amazing.
I know that PTS doesn't just impact one person; it impacts the entire family.
Good point.
Yeah. Did wives and family members go into therapy to understand how to help and support their loved one? I'm curious about that.
I don't know of any that did, but I do want to read a quote. I got an email yesterday from this lady, and I asked her if I could quote her, because it was so amazing. Because you're right. It's not just the person battling post-traumatic stress that suffers. It is the spouse, the children. They all suffer. So when the family member who's battling post-traumatic stress gets better, that's a benefit for everybody. But her husband just went through stellate ganglion block, which we can talk about if you'd like. And she said he had it over a month ago. And she said, our family will never be the same in the most amazing ways. He's a whole new father to our boys. And he literally turned to me after the procedure and he said, I have a second chance at life. Oh. And it's been over a month. And she said, this man that I'm living with, it's the man I married. It's not the man we've all had to live with because of his post-traumatic stress. I have my husband back. My boys have their father back. And he recognizes I have a second chance at life. That was a powerful email.
Tell us what stellate ganglion block is.
Yes. So some people consider it controversial. But in my opinion, it's a fabulous treatment option. But it is a shot in the neck. And what they do is there's a cluster of nerves in the neck, and they're putting in anesthetic to numb the nerves. And when it wears off, what basically happens is it's rebooting the system. So a lot of our, what are they called? Our SEAL teams, our Rangers, I forget what they're, special forces. They're kicking down doors and they're all hyped up and they're highly trained and they're going into the, worst parts of the world where war's taking place and dealing with the toughest things, and they're highly trained. What happens when they're dealing with their post-traumatic stress is that whole area, they're constantly hyped up all the time. You need to be hyped up when you need it, that fight or flight response that we all need when something bad is about to happen. That happens to us and we go, we're out of here. Well, they get to a point where it's always on. They can't ever stop and relax. They're always revved up. And so, and they have the post-traumatic stress symptoms. And so anybody with battling post-traumatic stress can get this simple 10-minute procedure, shot in the neck. And usually it's 2 shots, one in one spot. We talk about it in the film. I'm not the doctor. I'll let the doctor explain it. But there's 2 shots, one part here. And they also can go to the other side if needed. But it's life-changing. And but that's what it is, stellate ganglion block. And because you have to go into the doctors and get a shot in the neck, some people don't like it. There are some side effects. We talk about them in the film. Every doctor I interviewed or talked to, I've never had patients with side effects who have gotten them, but they are there. And so we talk about it. So the public is aware that they are there. But I saw a guy before going in for stellate ganglion block. Couldn't even talk to him. He looked like a wild animal. His eyes, he kind of scared me. I kept my distance. And I asked his wife if it would be okay to interview him before. And she was like, no. And I kind of figured the answer. But afterwards, I went in. After the surgery, the simple shot, he was laying in the hospital bed, and I walked by and I saw a different person. So I said, hey, you mind if I talk to you? And he was happy to talk. I asked if we could film him, and he said yes. He didn't make it into the documentary, but I still remember the before and after. We went from being a wild animal to being a man who had a smile on his face, was laughing, this lightness in his eyes, a normal human being that was just excited because he felt so good. And he hadn't been out shopping in years because of post-traumatic stress, couldn't go out and handle it. And the first thing he said after getting the shot was, I can't wait to go shopping, is what he told his wife.
Every wife likes to hear that.
Funny, yeah.
I'm curious, did you ever follow up just to see if he is still doing well on any of the, I'm just curious.
Yeah. No, that's a very good question. And yes, I have followed up. Now with stellate ganglion block, many of the patients do need to have other shots at a later period, every 6 months, some every year, some every 5 years. It depends on the person. That's why with stellate ganglion block and many of the treatments, we really advise following up with something else. So stellate ganglion block, many people can't go and sit down and just have a simple conversation to get help from ART or RTM or go to a week-long program. They can't handle it. There's just no way. So what's great about stellate ganglion block is it's a great place first to reboot everything, get them back to a calmed, relaxed place where they can finally stop and go in and get help from a week-long program or ART therapist or RTM or horse therapy. So it works in combination with other things for long-term success with stellate ganglion block. And many of them, I think, working together for long-term is really really important for success.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Say what's really heartwarming is that many of these vets, having had the treatments that have changed their lives, go on to start their own initiatives where they're helping others. Tell us about a few of those.
Yeah, I mentioned Brian earlier, Brian Anderson. He does Veterans Alternative. And it's a fabulous camp on the East Coast. And then you've got Dan. I can't remember. He's going to shoot me, Dan's last name. But he runs an organization called 220.org, wanting to get, of course, the suicide rate among veterans from 22 down to 0. And he has done ART. He happened to like RTM better. In his case, again, it's all individual. And now he's doing something new as well that I'm going to be interviewing him about in regards to that. But he is helping thousands of, again, veterans, first responders with their post-traumatic stress. And he's getting calls from all over the world, and they're helping people through Zoom or video conferencing. And he is a veteran. He was also suicidal. He was going to commit suicide when he got a phone call from his buddies. You probably remember him from the film. When he got a phone call from his buddies saying, "Hey, did you hear about so-and-so?" He's like, "No, what?" He said he killed himself last night. And he was, wow. And he saw how it was so traumatic hearing that news to all of his comrades from that. He thought, I can't do this to them. So he said, this guy killing himself saved my life, because I was going to, without a doubt, I was going to, until I realized how devastating it would be to the people around me. And I realized I couldn't do that. Well, he got help, did ART, loved it, changed his life, and then RTM. And then now he has his nonprofit and helping a lot of different people, but a veteran and also a sheriff. So he had quite a career with both and lots of trauma.
And it's good that he can bring it to them in their own homes. Is he doing groups at a time? Several people at once?
One-on-one.
One-on-one.
Yeah. And the great thing about him is he was a drill sergeant as well. And, a tough guy and a badass sheriff. And, for him to say, get help. You're not weak. I mean, look at this. I'm looking at him going, look at this guy, Dan. I mean, he's a tough dude. And he's saying, get help. It's a normal reaction, post-traumatic stress. Don't suffer in silence, get help. And one-on-one, you don't even have to talk about the trauma. He's there to help with his team. So it's 220.org.
I can imagine, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Rebecca.
I was just going to say, I can imagine the freedom the veteran feels once he asks for help, that it's okay for him to get help. What a relief that must be with the individual and the family as well, too. And
I think it's good for the family, because not all people dealing with post-traumatic stress are going to want to sit down and watch the film. Many people feel like they deserve to suffer because they feel guilty and they don't think they should get better. This is their lot in life because of their screw up or whatever they think they did that they, I don't believe they did, but that's the guilt that they have. But the family members, the loved ones, can watch the film. They can learn about the different treatments and programs, and they can introduce them to their loved one in hopes that they'll get some help.
Yeah.
Wow. I remember the one with the guy where you see the scenes of the vehicle, on fire. He just could not get those thoughts out of his head and the images that he'd seen. And he had guilt too. But afterwards, he was able to remember his friends, the good times, and really honor their memories rather than constantly replaying, the tragedies over and over.
Yeah. And, the other thing I think is important to talk about is some people have given up trying because they've come across different treatments or programs that they were offered. They got excited about them and they didn't work. And so the devastation was so traumatic on them that they stopped trying, because it would take them months to recover from another disappointment of getting your hopes up and it not working. And Sherry talks about this in San Diego. And she said it took her, I think, 9 months before she got around to trying the treatment that she found success in. And she only finally tried it because so many of the people around her were saying, this works. And she wasn't willing to try it because she was so tired of the devastation when things didn't work. But when she tried it, and again, this one was RTM, it changed her life. And she was in tears in the film, in tears. She's wiping away the tears as she said, this saved my life. And, she had given up. And so there are people who may be watching, there's people out there who have given up, but you don't have to. There are treatments. There are people who are exactly where you were or are, and they now have their lives back.
Yeah.
Michael, you have produced, directed many films. This became your passion project. How has it changed you?
I think I don't know if it's changed me, but what I've noticed, which to me is heartbreaking, is kind of what we were just talking about, that there is help that will give people their lives back, and yet some people won't take advantage of it. That breaks my heart. And I've talked to a number of people. Now, Carl, the guy in San Diego I told you about at the beginning of this hour, that started this whole venture journey for me, he still hasn't gotten help. I've tried everything to get him help, and he hasn't followed through with anything. I talked to a Vietnam veteran last week who saw me, a news interview I did in Texas. He sends me an email, and I've talked to him a number of times back and forth, and he doesn't want to get help. He says, I'm stuck this way the rest of my life. He's miserable, and he plans to live that way the rest of his life. And I'm like, why? there are options. There are things we can do to help you. And, he doesn't care. He doesn't want, I don't know if he doesn't care. He's not going to take action. That breaks my heart when I know there's help and there are people who have given up or are willing to live this life of misery because they think they deserve it, I guess. I'm not really sure. That's hard for me to deal with.
I can only imagine, definitely. And there's nothing you can do. If their mind is made up, it's sad to watch because if he did take therapy, he could have his life back. But I get it. It's heartfelt.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you about something. There is a nonprofit organization called Wounded Warriors that is doing great. However, it did suffer from some bad press a few years ago over problems which now have been put right. Since Wounded Heroes and Wounded Warriors are similar titles, I wonder, have you suffered at all from people confusing your project with their organization?
I don't think we've suffered, but it's natural since Wounded Warrior, that name has been out there for so long, that just naturally comes off, comes out of people's mouths. So when they're thinking Wounded Heroes, many times they're saying Wounded Warriors out loud. And so we have nothing to do with Wounded Warriors or the organization and nothing. I'm not saying anything bad about them at all. It's just that we're unrelated to them completely. And they're doing work for veterans that help. And my film is separate, Wounded Heroes. And we're doing, we think, work that's going to help as well.
And you and your wife, you paid for this, correct? Am I correct on that?
Yeah, my wife and I funded this. Now, we did receive some donations in the beginning. I was hoping to raise enough money to fund the entire film and give the film away at no cost. But, fundraising is difficult, as I found. And so the project was so important to us that my wife and I agreed that even though we didn't have the funds through donations, we would just fund it ourselves. And then our 3 years of our time, working on it, we'll just do all of that, and then we'll just release the film like we normally would with rentals and purchase on Amazon and iTunes and Google Play and all the other platforms so that we can get reimbursed for the cost and the time. But yeah, we did fund it, and I hope we get reimbursed at some point.
You deserve to be. Yes. Michael, we're almost out of time now. We want to thank you for making Wounded Heroes and helping us gain a better understanding of PTS and also how it affects people and what can be done about it. Because when you've got something that is non-invasive, non-drug, that works, my goodness, wouldn't you choose that every time over anything else? And also, it's so much cheaper. It's so much cheaper for the VA. It's so much cheaper for whoever has to, pay for these drugs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, with 17 to 22 veterans dying by suicide every single day, it's got to stop. Yeah. It's got to stop.
And you know what? That's veterans. That's not taking into account the police officers, the firefighters. Their suicide rate is skyrocketing. And again, 911 dispatchers, they have to sit on the phone and listen to somebody commit suicide, or somebody's calling in for help because they're being murdered and they have to listen to the murder, and babies being accidents or whatever, firefighters having to see that, police. I mean, the suicide rate. And then with COVID, the doctors and the nurses, the post-traumatic stress is a real problem for many, and this film will help all of them.
Do you think these type of therapies that you offer in your film would help people with other mental health issues?
I don't know because I'm not a doctor, but everyone that we did feature in the film, I believe they're specifically for post-traumatic stress, but I don't know.
Yeah, I was just curious. Yeah.
Well, the statistics are appalling. The stories are harrowing, and every single veteran in this film is either no longer taking drugs or taking far fewer drugs, only the ones that they absolutely need. I think one of the phrases that really struck me in this movie that will stay with me is that PTS is an injury. It's not an illness. And this is how people should look at it, not to be ashamed of it. for those of you who are watching this, if you know someone who needs to get their life back, please tell them about this movie, Wounded Heroes, which will be available for rent on Amazon, Google, Vimeo, iTunes from March the 5th.
Yep.
Rebecca, any last things you want to say?
No, I'm just so grateful and honored to be here with you and you showing the film to both Sandy and I. Do you have any parting words that you want to say, Michael?
Well, I just want to say that I have the utmost respect for our military, firefighters, police officers, 911 callers, all of our first responders. And I thank them for what they do. That's not my world. And this film is my gift to them, just in hopes of giving them the life they deserve, because they've done so much for us.
Thank you. We have to leave it there, I'm afraid. For more information, excerpts and resources, visit Michael's website, woundedheroesdocumentary.com. You can also check out Michael at michaelgier.com as well and learn more about what he does. That's it for today. We'll be back at the same time 2 weeks from now. Till then, it's goodbye from me.
And me.
And remember... And you, of course you're the guest. And please remember, there is a crack in everything. It's where the light gets in.